Another vigil will be held today in the centre of the city with the Lord Mayor, representatives from the council and local faith leaders also in attendance.
There is a suspect in custody and the police are still holding him. Let's turn to former Met Detective Chief Superintendent Kevin Hurley. Kevin, a lot of emotion in this. Terrible, terrible, heartbreaking to watch those families and the pain that they are going through. But the police have to stick to their protocol and they've got to get their evidence right. A lot of people are very impatient for charges to be made.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, any unexpected death, particularly of young people for the families, is shocking and traumatic. And of course, in the police, we deal with that a lot. But you are right. For the police, actually, in investigative terms, although there's a lot of different what we call crime scenes, this is a pretty easy case to put it together because the suspect is pretty clearly identified and there's going to be a lot of forensic evidence there. I think the point I would make, and it is a bit of learning that we still have not woken up to, when we get either these these marauding attackers, whatever their reason, whether it's mental illness or terroristic based, is just how vulnerable we in society are to the current way in which our police are configured. And I mean by that, it's by luck, really, that unarmed police officers were able to stop this guy and deal with him. Because if this had happened in any of other parts of the country, it would have been the same result, whether it was Weybridge in Surrey or Guildford High Street or Bristol Town Centre. The first officers to be called to these kind of situations are always unarmed and generally unable to deal with it. The learning from this kind of situation, marauding drivers, marauding knife people, is obvious when you look at what happens on the continent. If we look at the Nice lorry driver who killed 80-odd people, normal patrolling police on bicycles use handguns, pistols, to stop him. If you look at the various attackers that occur, even at the Bataclan siege, the initial massacre was slowed down by one officer with a handgun. Because we still persist with this idea of Dixon of Dock Green, keeping our officers unarmed, and we are in fact one of only 3 countries in the world where police are unarmed, Iceland and Norway being the other 2, we the public are left at great risk the next time either a madman or a marauding terrorist or a combination of both sets about doing this. There are many examples in the UK where we've seen this occur. If we remember the case, I think it was Colin Bird up in the Lake District, who ran amok, shot 11 people dead, was actually followed at one time by unarmed police who couldn't intervene. We have the case of the very brave British Transport Police, unarmed apart from a baton, who took on the 3 terrorists at London Bridge and delayed them, but couldn't actually stop them.
But Kevin, a lot of people will be applauding you and saying, here, here. And I think what you're saying is basically if the police were armed, they wouldn't have a suspect in custody. He would be dead by now. But as I understand it, it is police officers themselves on the beat, on the ground, that are against being armed.
Well, that's not necessarily true. I mean, having come from the Metropolitan Police and into London, I can remember the polling where the majority of what you'd call the uniform response, uniform patrol officers, actually polled that they wanted to carry a sidearm. There's this kind of myth that goes on with police officers who patrol in what you might call the nicer areas or sit in offices and so on, who don't go to the last minute 999 calls, not knowing what they're going to face, who say, oh no, we don't want to be armed. And there's also this kind of perception amongst police officers, which is if we carry a firearm and we shoot someone, we'll be pilloried and so on. To some extent, that's true. But the fact of the matter is, no police officer has ever been convicted of unlawfully shooting someone. My position is simple. If you are a police officer and you're going to patrol our streets, whether or not you like it, part of the equipment you will carry is a handgun. Because I want you to be able to protect me and mine when I'm in a shopping centre in Guildford or walking down Esher High Street or wherever I am and someone runs amok and starts shooting, stabbing or running people over. It actually isn't a choice for the police officers as far as I'm concerned.
If I may,
you do the job carry the weapon.
We were interviewing an eyewitness on the morning of the events, and he was describing hearing shots being fired, and it certainly looked from the windscreen of the vehicle that fires may have been shot. I don't know if we've been told definitively that there weren't shots involved, but of course he was tasered. They're not completely unarmed in the sense that they do have ways of defending themselves, and they successfully apprehended him. I do think it's still open to debate, this whole issue. Well,
2 points. I mean, that doesn't look like gunshots to me. That looks like a hard bit of the body, either a head or an elbows, hit the windscreen. And secondly, taser is actually far less effective at stopping people in terms of using batons on them. What you need is something, when someone's driving a car, running along with a gun, you can stop them decisively. The classic is the marauding terrorist in Streatham High Street a couple of years ago, followed by a surveillance team who knew he would be up to no good, went into a shop, picked up a knife, started stabbing people. Because the surveillance team was armed, they were able to shoot him on the spot. The issue on it is simple. Either we want our police to be able to protect us immediately, or we're prepared to let people die. It's as simple as that.
And the other consequence or effect, Kevin, could be that the marauder, the attacker, knows what the outcome's going to be. They know that if they start something, the chances are they are going to be shot, which may be a huge deterrent.
Well, I mean, if they are, shall we say, fanatically driven, they know they're going to be shot anyway. All it does, it limits the number of innocent people who get maimed and stabbed to death by them.
Yeah. Well, so, we don't know that this...
I'm not sure there's a deterrent.
Yeah. If I can bring it back to this particular incident, though, obviously counter-terrorism police aren't involved and there's no fanaticism involved in this particular incident. Why do you think there hasn't been a charge yet, given that they're not looking for anybody else?
Well, because what you've got to do before you charge is you've got to have all your ducks in the row and all the evidence gathered. And so what they will be waiting for is results back from the forensic science laboratories, which will place this person more closely at the scene so that the case against him is overwhelming. And I'm not, by the way, saying that we should arm police solely to deal with marauding terrorists. I'm also saying there are some people who are so deranged and so violent, perhaps like this guy, that they may need to be stopped immediately. And I'm also not saying he should have been shot dead. I'm merely saying that if police are able to respond quickly in our shopping centre in Woods Green, Oxford High Street or so on, where someone's running amok, they can be stopped from killing and maiming more of us.
Mm-hmm. Kevin, very forthright views there, and we'll ask our listeners and viewers today if they support what you're saying, if they think that is the way it should be. And indeed, if you are a serving police officer, I mean, obviously, we won't read out your name, but, you know, tell us what you think the restrictions are and the pros and cons of what Kevin Hurley had to say. Kevin is a former Met Detective Chief Superintendent. He knows what he's talking about.